Maria Chen stood in her corner office on the 47th floor, staring at her frozen computer screen with the kind of frustration only a tech failure at the worst possible moment could inspire. In 2 hours, she would present to the board a presentation that could secure $300 million merger or destroy everything she'd built over 15 years. Her assistant had tried rebooting, the IT department wasn't answering, and her backup laptop had mysteriously vanished from her desk. That's when she noticed him through her glass door. Carlos, the evening janitor, methodically cleaning the hallway with the same quiet dignity he brought to work every single night. Maria had seen him 1,000 times but never really looked at him. He was part of the building's invisible workforce, the people who kept everything running while remaining perpetually unseen. An idea struck here, and not a good one. But desperation makes fools of us all. She'd read somewhere that humor could diffuse stress. Maybe making a ridiculous request would help her laugh off this nightmare. "Excuse me," Maria called out, opening her door. "Carlos, right?" The man looked up, surprise flickering across his weathered face. In 3 years of working this floor, the CEO had never spoken to him directly. "Yes, Mom." His voice carried a slight accent, soft and respectful. Maria gestured dramatically at her computer. "Our entire IT department has apparently vanished into thin air, and I have a presentation that's going to make or break this company in 2 hours. Don't suppose you know anything about fixing computers?" She laughed to a brittle, stressed sound that she hoped conveyed this was all just absurd. What happened next, Maria would replay in her mind for years to come. Carlos didn't laugh. He didn't make excuses or shuffle away. Instead, he carefully set down his cleaning cart, wiped his hands on his uniform, and said, "May I take a look?" Maria blinked. "Oh, I mean, you don't have to." But Carlos was already walking into her office, his eyes focused on the frozen screen with an intensity that seemed out of place for someone holding a mop 5 seconds ago. He sat down in her $1,000 ergonomic chair, the first time Maria had ever seen anyone else in that seat, and his fingers began moving across the keyboard with surprising confidence. "What's it doing?" he asked, eyes scanning the screen. "It just froze during a software update. Everything I need is locked inside that machine." Carlos nodded slowly, then did something Maria didn't expect. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small USB drive attached to his keychain. Within minutes, he'd booted the computer into a mode Maria had never seen. His fingers flying across the keyboard typing commands that looked like a foreign language. "You know computers?" Maria asked, feeling foolish for the shock in her voice. "A little bit," Carlos said, his attention never leaving the screen. "I studied computer engineering in Mexico City, had my own software company there." Maria felt something cold settle in her stomach. "You? What?" "Small company, 6 employees. We developed inventory management systems for restaurants." His voice remained steady, matter of fact, as he continued working. "The economy collapsed. Business dried up. I came here thinking I could start over, but nobody would recognize my degrees. Nobody would give me a chance without American credentials, without perfect English, without references they could verify. So you became a janitor." "I became employed," Carlos corrected gently. "I send money home to my daughter. She's in medical school. That's what matters." Shame washed over Maria like ice water. She'd built her empire on finding talent, on looking past resumes to see potential. She gave speeches about it. She'd written op-eds about breaking barriers and recognizing hidden value. Yet Carlos had been invisible to her, not for months, but for years. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. Carlos glanced up at her, confusion in his eyes. For what? You didn't break your computer on purpose. He turned back to the screen. There. Your files are recovering now. Should be done in 10 minutes. But Maria barely heard him. She was seeing everything differently now. The careful precision of his work, the systematic way he approached problems, the quiet competence she'd mistaken for simple service. How many others like Carlos worked in her building? How many brilliant minds had she walked past every day without seeing? Why didn't you say something? Maria asked. Why didn't you tell someone you had these skills? Carlos smiled a sad, knowing expression. Mrs. Chen, I applied for IT positions here 5 times. My applications never made it past the first screening. Wrong zip code. Foreign degree, employment gap. The algorithm rejected me every time. He stood up, gesturing to the screen. Your presentation should be accessible now. Maria looked at the screen, then back at Carlos. She saw him now, really saw him. The intelligence in his eyes, the dignity in his posture, the quiet resignation of someone who'd learned to accept being overlooked. What's your daughter's name? She asked suddenly. Sophia. She wants to be a pediatric surgeon. Sophia's lucky to have a father who sacrifices so much for her dreams. Maria's voice cracked slightly. Carlos, I need to tell you something. That joke I'm asking you to fix my computer, it was cruel. It was born from my own stress and privilege. This assumption that it would be funny to ask the janitor for help with something technical. I'm ashamed of that assumption. I'm ashamed that I never bothered to know your story. Carlos shook his head. You weren't cruel. You were stressed. And you did ask for help. That's more than most people do. Don't let me off that easy, Maria said. I should have been better. They stood in silence for a moment, the computer humming softly as it completed its recovery. Through the window, the city sparkled below them. Millions of lives, millions of stories, so many people invisible to each other. I want to offer you a position, Maria said finally, in our IT department, to start. Not because I feel guilty, although I do, but because you clearly have skills we need. Carlos looked at her carefully. I appreciate that, Mrs. Chen. But I've heard that before. Kind words after a moment of connection, then nothing changes. His honesty cut deep because it was true. Maria had seen it happen. The momentary inspiration that faded by morning. The good intentions that got buried under daily pressures. You're right to be skeptical, Maria acknowledged. So let me be specific. Tomorrow morning, I'm meeting with HR to review our entire hiring process. Those algorithms that screen out people like you, gone. Those requirements for American degrees, reconsidered. We're going to value experience and capability over credentials and zip codes. And I'm creating a new position, a director of technology integration. I want someone who understands both the technical side and what it means to be overlooked. The salary is $180,000 to start. Carlos's eyes widened. For the first time, his composure cracked. Mrs. Chen, yeah, I know it's sudden. Sleep on it. But Carlos, I'm serious. This isn't charity. This is me finally recognizing what was in front of me all along. Maria extended her hand. And please, call me Maria. He shook her hand, his grip firm and sure. Maria, I need to finish cleaning this floor. I have responsibilities. I know you do. That's exactly why I'm making this offer. After Carlos left, Maria stood alone in her office, looking at her recovered presentation. She'd worked for months on these slides, on the data and projections that would convince the board to approve the merger. But suddenly, it all felt less important than what had just happened. She opened her laptop and began typing a new email to her entire executive team. The subject line read, "We need to talk about who we're not seeing." 3 months later, the merger went through. But that wasn't the story people at the company told. They talked about Carlos, now leading a team of 12 in the newly created Technology Integration Department. They talked about the 37 other employees who'd been promoted after the hiring process was overhauled. They talked about Maria, who now made it a point to know the names and stories of every person who worked in the building. Sophia video called her father on his first day in the new position, tears streaming down her face as Carlos showed her his office. "You did it, Papa," she said. "You never stopped believing." Carlos smiled at his daughter on the screen, then looked around at his new reality. "No, Mija." Someone finally started seeing, and Maria, watching from her office as Carlos oriented his new team, finally understood what leadership really meant. It wasn't about having the vision to see the future. It was about having the humility to see the present too and the courage to admit when you'd been blind.